Okay, so what are archetypes? Today we're going to talk about archetypes. Let's just recap really quick. So we discussed about social constructionism and how we are a very good expression of gender, and how this very good expression of gender creates an individuated personality and individuated character. We also talked about what does it mean to be Mukimne and how it not only characterizes our experiences, but it ultimately colors our worldview as gender nuanced people. And the more we come to understand ourselves, gender nuanced people, that we are then required to then follow our archetype. So today we're going to talk about archetypes, why they're important, and what they have to do, what the heck do they have to do with gender nuanced people. Okay, so what are archetypes? Archetypes are universal modes that help to shape identity, personality, and they also influence human behavior. They emerge from the unconscious and are reflected in our souls. So you may hear me say that, for example, like throughout other videos that I've made, I will talk about how, the archetype of the mother, the archetype of the child will then emerge through a person's experience. That the archetype emerges from the unconscious realm of the person. So, for example, we'll talk about the archetype of the mother, right? That a woman that has a child, that the archetype of a mother would then emerge to her experience. But although that women have the archetype of the mother, that archetype is then experienced differently by different types of women. So if we use the Bible story of Ishmael, of Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, and Isaac, that both Sarah and Hagar had the archetype of a mother that emerged through their experience, but because of the way that they experienced motherhood, that archetype of the mother was experienced differently by each of those women. Also, you have the archetype of the child. So you have the golden child, you have the nature child, you have the neglected child. And these are and there's a plethora of archetypes for children, right? And so using that same story of, you know, Ishmael and Isaac, they both had the child archetype. But Ishmael and Isaac experienced their childhood completely differently. Isaac was the promised child, he was the miracle baby, and so he was the golden child. While Ishmael, although he was the firstborn, he was overlooked because he was not the promised child. So the archetype of a neglected child emerged through Ishmael's experience. So the creator is the oversoul, and I like to think of the oversoul as containing all human archetypes. So the way that we have a soul as human beings, right? We have our metaphysical soul, that you could think of God or the creator as having all souls that could ever possibly come into existence, all that material, that metaphysical substance that creates souls, that the oversoul possesses that, and it is just this big one soul, right? This oversoul that overlooks all of us. And that is where the archetypes emerge from our experience, and that's how we ultimately are able to reflect our experiences and be a mirror God in the universe. Now, God or the creator is on an infinite timeline. That God is the same yesterday, today, forevermore. And God is going to always permeate this existence, this experience of the sacred field of life. So when you pull from your archetype, that your archetype, you can pull it from a historical past, right? So you ultimately will see how some archetypes re-emerged within this historical context, and we'll get to that in another video. So what is the soul? I like to use this little acronym for the soul, that the soul is the story of your life, okay? It is the way how it describes how the archetype is experienced through how you as the character experience your archetype. So we were all children at a point in time in our lives, and depending on how you experience your childhood, that was affecting your soul because that's the inner part of you, your inward part. Archetypes shape how each character experiences their life. And when you become aware and you understand your archetype fully, it leads to a process of individuation. Most people are dominated by one specific archetype, but gender nuanced people, our archetypes are infinite. Our archetypes are infinite because gender is ultimately infinite for us. Following our archetype helps us to understand our character, which then creates a degree of natality within our lives. And as we begin to follow our archetype, that we then can understand what the Creator has called us to be, that we could then become what the Creator has called us to be.